To continue with the chapter on rebirth. So the introductory paragraphs told us how very difficult it is to convince anyone about the theory of reincarnation or the rebirth, because the scientific mind or the rational mind will have all kinds of doubts and debates regarding this question, because it cannot be proved on the physical level. And to continue with the reading, when we go into details, the uncertainty increases. Rebirth accounts, for example, for the phenomenon of genius, inborn faculty, and so many other psychological mysteries. But then science comes in with its all-sufficient explanation by heredity. Though like that of rebirth, all-sufficient only to those who already believe in it. You see, the next argument or the next example may be that of the phenomenon of genius, or some inborn faculty and other psychological mysteries. You see, some people may have developed a tremendous genius. You know, we have the child prodigies, musicians and singers and dancers and artists and whatever. And some other faculties. Here it is perhaps easier to recourse to the theory of rebirth, because we have already seen that rebirth is a phenomenon in which there is an evolution of the psychic being through the different personalities that it takes up in different births. That means, if a particular psychic being has had already the experience of being a great musician or a great poet or a great this or that, that personality remains as a developed personality, and in one of its next births it could bring back that already developed personality from the past. So there could be a child prodigy in music or art or something. But science tells us no, it is there in the genes. But it says yes, those who want to believe in this theory of genes, they will obviously do so. Because science tells us it is there in the genes of his father. But oftentimes we have seen examples where neither the mother, nor the father, nor the grandparents were musicians, and suddenly we see a child born with a great prodigy, a great faculty of music. So they will try to trace this gene to some other thing, saying, no, maybe 4 times removed in your past, in a previous lineage you have somebody musician. So science will always stick to this question of genes. So Sri Aurobindo tells us, well, they will continue to believe, but this is better explained with the theory of rebirth. Without doubt, the claims of heredity have been absurdly exaggerated. It has succeeded in accounting for much, not all, in our physical makeup, our temperament, our vital peculiarities. So the genetic theory is good for the physical makeup. The features that I have are basically from my parents. So as far as the physical makeup goes, he says genetic theory could be accepted, or the question of heredity. Or as far as our temperament, it all depends, also, not all, it doesn't depend fully, but a lot of the traces can come from your parents' heredity, that they have been this philosophic minded, or the music minded, or this mind. So that kind of a musician or the philosopher, the temperament comes in. That also can be possible through heredity. And one more example of vital peculiarities, the nature. All this, he would say, heredity could be a good answer to your physical makeup to your temperament and the vital peculiarities. But, he says, its attempt to account for genius, inborn faculty and other psychological phenomena of a higher kind is a pretentious failure. So it cannot really account, the theory of heredity cannot really account for the question of genius or other great faculties. But this may be because science knows nothing at all that is fundamental about our psychology. No more than primitive astronomers knew of their constitution and law of the stars, whose movement they yet observe with a sufficient accuracy. So he is calling this question, this kind of science, is comparing science with the primitive astrology, which has been observing the stars, but it knows nothing about the true forces that are working in astrology. So similarly, science also, although it is pretending or is trying to get into the deeper level, psychological levels, it hardly knows anything. Psychology, at least in its time when this was written, was very much in a very primitive kindergarten level. Of course, now in the last 100 years or so, things have improved, definitely, we must agree to that. But when he was writing, it was very much in a primitive level, so he says, is as primitive as the primitive astronomers. I do not think that even when science knows more and better, it will be able to explain. I do not think that even when science knows more and better, it will be able to explain these things by heredity. But the scientist may well argue that it is only at the beginning of his researches that the generalization which has explained so much may well explain all, and that at any rate his hypothesis has had a better start in its equipment of provable facts than the theory of reincarnation. Well, Sri Aurobindo does give his opinion regarding the possibility of science, if that is science, if it can at all ever explain this question of genius, even when science knows more and better. Because you see, say even now we say science has developed 100 years later much more. But even today psychologists are fumbling when it comes to the question of the inner nature of man. There are lots of experiments, lots of theories, umpteen number of, and especially in America we see plenty of people are coming up with new theories. But still I would say it is very much peripheral. They have not gone into the depths, of course, much better than what it was 100 years back. But still, they're far from the inner spiritual truth. And I described to you once, I remember, there is, in some schools of thought, a recognition of something central being. But to give it the nature of a spiritual being, to give it the nature that it is equivalent to the Supreme Creator, the Brahman, so that they cannot. Because then there's a question of spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs that come in. So they are averse to and afraid of maybe jumping into any kind of spirituality. However, things are better, but still he says, I do not think it will be able to explain these things by heredity. So even if biological science has developed immensely, as now it has happened in the genetic theory, still he says the theory of heredity can never ever explain the question of the genius or our psychological faculties. Well, he says he also is taking the side of the scientist. Scientists will say, well, we are still at our beginning. We have just started our research, but in the future we will be able to get to the truth of the genius. But he's saying this may be their argument, but at any rate, his hypothesis has had a better start in its equipment of provable facts. You see, now what the psychologist is doing, trying to prove facts, he says at least he has started in this direction, research in this direction. Before, they would not take anything psychological, spiritual into account. But now it seems the later psychology does accept fully mystical and spiritual experiences. Before, they would put these experiences out of the door. But now they have let it in, saying, let us see what these mystical experiences are. Because so many yogis, so many sadhus, so many gurus have spoken about it, the psychology is now opening its door to see if there is any truth at all in this. Nevertheless, the argument of the reincarnationist is so far a good argument and respect-worthy, though not conclusive. But there is another more clamorously advanced, which seems to me to be on a par with the hostile reasoning from absence of memory, at least in the form in which it is usually advanced to attract unripe minds. Well, now we are going to another explanation, which I suppose is closer to what we believe to be the theory of rebirth. That is what he says, the ethical argument. Till now, what Sri Aurobindo has given us are the arguments of the scientist, how the scientist and the rationalist, they disbelieve. Now, and also we have seen one theory where, based on the question of memory, that we do not have memory of the past births, people refuted the question of rebirth. But then there is the other side, the ethical side, which affirms completely the theory of rebirth, which is in fact, as we will see in this para, the most common belief regarding the necessity of rebirth. That is the ethical theory. And he puts it very much in plain language. You can understand it very easily. He says, this is the ethical argument by which it is sought to justify God's ways with the world, or the world's ways with itself. There must, it is thought, be a moral governance for the world, or at least some sanction of reward in the cosmos for virtue, some sanction of punishment for sin. So this is now the famous theory of karma, which has been linked up with the necessity of rebirth. You see, that's why always we discuss rebirth and karma together. Because that is the link. Why rebirth? But Sri Aurobindo would give us, towards the end of this chapter, the spiritual reasons. But commonly it is always the ethical reasons. Why should there be rebirth? Well, the reason is, they say that in this world there is a moral governance. That means God is a kind of a moral ruler. What is that moral ruler? That you do something good, you get reward. If you do something bad, you get punishment. That's exactly as he would say, it is as if God is a judge or a teacher, or a moral teacher sitting there with a whip in his hand and saying, hey, you have done something wrong. Takes up a huge list from his diary and says, these are the 842 and these are the 953. So he will give you so many slashes for that 953 errors and maybe some lollipops for the 843 good things you have done. So we have translated God into this primitive level of a person who has no other business than to run the world on the basis of morality. It's as if constantly looking at you to say, hey, I'm watching you constantly, I'm noting down your good and bad. So that is the essence of this ethical theory. So he says, but upon our perplexed and chaotic earth, no such sanction appears. But Sri Aurobindo immediately tells us, if you think that there is this moral rule in this world, is there a moral justification? Why? Because look at this. We see the good man thrust down into the press of miseries, and the wicked flourishing like a green bay tree and not cut down miserably in his end. Is there any moral justice when you look around the world? Even a common man would say there isn't anything. So you see, there's so much of incoherence between the moral theory and the moral reality. Theory of good and reward and bad and punishment doesn't at all apply to this world. Because he says, look at a good man. He may be suffering with great miseries. And a wicked man flourishing like a green bay tree. I mean, he has all the comforts, all the wealth, all the name, all the fame. And then he is not even cut down miserably even in his end. That miserable wicked man, or not the miserable, the wicked man lives to the end of his life with all the comfort he has had and nothing ever happens. So Sri Aurobindo is telling, where is your moral governance? So immediately we see this kind of a disparity between moral law and the reality of the world. So with this single argument we can say, this theory of karma based on reward and punishment doesn't stand ground at all. Now he says, we see the good man thrust down. So he says, now this is intolerable. It is a cruel anomaly. It's a reflection on God's wisdom and justice, almost a proof that God does not exist. That God is not. We must remedy that. So if this is the state of affairs, who can ever believe in God? We say there is the divine looking after us, looking at us and all that big philosophy. If a common man comes and says, where is Ananda, your God, tell me, what have I done to suffer this misery? Why am I being tortured by these people like that? I have done nothing to anybody. So he says, where is your God? And then he would say, I think God doesn't exist. Because if there is really a God, then he should look into these questions. So there is the agnosticism that comes in, and then people can also write a book called God is Dead. So he says, or if God is not, we must have some other sanction for righteousness. How comforting it would be if you could tell a good man and even the amount of his goodness. For should not the Supreme be a strict and honorable accountant? Now, this is of course a bit of a dig at these moralists. He says, if you have to tell a good man why he is good or how much is good, the quantity of his goodness, by what? By the amount of ghee that he is allowed to put into his stomach, and the number of rupees he can jingle into his bank, and the various kinds of good luck that accrue to him. So if these were the parameters of your judgment of a good man, because he has got crores of rupees in his bank, and he has got all the good luck in the world, he has got all the wealth and name and positions, if that is supposed to be the scale for his goodness, then Sri Aurobindo would say, well, what a logic we have. Because he will say further, yes, and how comforting to it if we could point out finger at the wicked stripped of all concealment and cry to him, O thou wicked one, for if thou wert not evil, wouldst thou in the world governed by God, or at least by good, be thus ragged, hungry, unfortunate, pursued by griefs, void of honor among men? Yes, thou art proved wicked, because thou art ragged. God's justice is established. The other argument, If somebody is a beggar, somebody is in a poor hut, we say, obviously you are a bad man. Because you are ragged, you are poor, you are this. That itself shows that you are a wicked man, that you are a sinner. Because if you are not a sinner, you would be like the other man, sitting in the comforts of a 5-star hotel. So we have, I think we discussed this in the Life Divine class also. We are coming down to the level of judging the good and the bad by the material comforts and discomforts. Always we say the good man is this and the bad man is this. So he would say, yes, the Supreme Intelligence being fortunately wiser and nobler than man's childishness, this is impossible. But let us take comfort. It appears that if the good man has not enough good luck and ghee and rupees, it's because he's really a scoundrel suffering for his crimes. But a scoundrel is past life, who has suddenly turned a new life in his mother's womb. And if yonder wicked man flourishes and tramples gloriously on the world, it is because of his goodness in a past life. The saint that was then having since been converted, was it by his experience of the temporal vanity or of virtues to the cult of sin? You see, these are the common beliefs that he's really having a good dig at. You see, if say we said a good man is one who's living in a wealthy, healthy house. But if we say, no sir, he's a good man, but he's suffering. Suffering means physical suffering, lack of money, lack of wealth, lack of comfort. Then what is the explanation? And we have a very good explanation to say, he's suffering now, he's a good man, but he's suffering now because of his past karma. So you see, we have this theory explanation very easily. If he's suffering now, he's suffering because of his past karma. And similarly, he says, if a scoundrel, if he is doing well, you'll say, well sir, he is a wicked man, but in his past life he was a saint. That is why he has got all the wealth now. You see, everywhere this moral theory is there to justify your bad actions, your good place, you are a rich man or a poor man. Where you are caught a bit logically, then you say it's a past birth. So you see, you cannot argue here with this ethical attitude, because every time they escape. Why is there suffering? Because of past birth. Why is there a good fortune? Because of past birth. So everywhere there is this question, and then Sri Aurobindo says, all is explained, all is justified. We suffer for our sins in another body, we shall be rewarded in another body for our virtues in this, and so it will go on ad infinitum. So you see this law of karma, how primitive he would say in the next paragraph. Because this way there's endless. What I do now, the good thing that I do now, I won't get the reward in this life. I'll get reward for what I do now in my next life. So that means what I do bad now, I'll get a suffering in the next life. And in the next life again, next life. So it goes on, next life to ad infinitum. He says, where does this karma end? Where does this thing lead us to? It is quite unacceptable theory of infinite regression. So Sri Aurobindo says, obviously, we cannot accept such thing. But then you see, this is the beauty, as I often tell you, how Sri Aurobindo really embraces all attitudes and really finds the reason for it. It not finds the justification for it, but why is there such a belief in mankind? So he says, obviously, this scheme of things is only a variation of the old spiritual material bribe and menace. The bribe of a heaven of fat joys for the good, and the threat of a hell of eternal fire, or bestial tortures for the wicked. Well, this theory of karma, this theory of rebirth based on your past actions, is actually a variation of a religious faith. The religion has promoted this idea of what? Heaven and hell. So if you do the good things, there's a bribe of heaven, of fat joys. You see, you go to heaven and you have all the joys. But how will you get that heaven? If you do good things now. It's the same theory. How will you get the good luxury and riches in your next life? If you do good things now. At the back of this is the religious idea of heaven and hell. So which as a philosophical theory has become karma, but on the religious level, it is the same thing of you have heaven or hell for your work, for the deeds that you do. The idea of the law of the world as primarily a dispenser of rewards and punishments is cognate to the idea of the Supreme Being as a judge, father, and schoolmaster who is continually rewarding with lollipops his good boys and continually caning his naughty urchins. You see where we have brought down God. A good schoolmaster or a principal of a school, hat badao, and then you have a cane on your hand, So that kind of a person who has nothing better but to caning a person or giving her lollipops. So this is where religion has brought down God, somebody who is there as a judge, a father, or a schoolmaster. So you see, we have lost completely the concept of divinity, the Supreme who transcends. But all the time here is a concept, good and bad. He is a moral God. He is not a spiritual Godhead. So this is where we have brought him down. And it says, it is cognate also to the barbarous and iniquitous system of savage and degrading punishment for social offences on which human society is still founded. Man insists continually on making God in his own image instead of seeking to make himself more and more in the image of God. And all these ideas are the reflection of the child and the savage and the animal in us, which we have still failed to transform or outgrow. He said now he is giving us the reason why there was this question of hell and heaven and morality. Because as he puts it here very beautifully, man insists continually on making God in his own image. I think we have said this long time, and I remember many years perhaps, that there is always an evolution of the concept of God himself. So those societies which have not advanced from, as Sri Aurobindo would call, of the stage of a childhood or a primitive level. So at a primitive level, God is always taken as a judge, somebody who punishes you and rewards you. Because our consciousness itself is on that low level, we cannot comprehend. Like if you tell the child, there is this Brahman and Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman and all that, he will say, what is it? I don't understand. But if you say, beta, God gives you a good lollipop, if you can pray this evening, then you will see at night you have a lollipop. That he will understand. So this is how humanity in its primitive evolutionary level has given to itself these simple rewards and punishments. Because a higher philosophy it will not understand. So he would say it is a necessary stage of human evolution. Because now if humanity has gone beyond the primitive level, I won't say the word humanity, it's a wrong judgment. Some people in humanity have reached a higher level of consciousness. For them, God is not one who punishes. If you say God is one who punishes and rewards, that itself shows the level of your mental and understanding or your consciousness level. So you see, it is so very important to grow out of our primitive idea, and that is why Sri Aurobindo would insist, grow out of this question of religion. Because as long as we are stuck on the level of religion, this is a concept that comes predominant in your mind, that he is a person who punishes and rewards. So when Sri Aurobindo and the mother would tell us to go beyond religion, it is not a question not only of going beyond the ceremonial aspects and the ritual aspects, but also to see into this concept that God is not one who punishes and rewards. He cannot do that. He is one who is beyond. And therefore he would tell us that man has this problem of continually making God on his own image, instead of seeking to make himself more and more in the image of God. You will see that the man has this tendency to bring down God to his own level. That is why, he even gives him the qualities of human nature. You see, we had, even in our Indian mythology, and especially we see a lot in the Greek mythology, how there are quarrels between godheads. When you go into our mythology also, there are plenty of quarrels and love affairs and this and that, everything. Because as Sri Aurobindo is telling us, we bring them to our level, bring them down to our level. So we cannot understand a God if I don't say that Zeus was angry with this person, or Persephone was angry with this, or Apollo was angry with that, or Indra was... You see, we are trying to communicate this God consciousness through our own language, the language that we understand. That is because of our low level of consciousness. But if we become more and more spiritual, God, Mother and Sri Aurobindo never speaks of a God who is angry or jealous or rivals or anything. Because that is not the way, that is not the level of the consciousness they are at. You see, if in my Kuchugupam you see a Senganiyama Koil there, in order to promote that Godhead, you have to make her dress like the human being, put a bindi like the human being, put a bangle like the human being, put a necklace like the human being. Because we think a goddess means she must be looking beautiful like a woman. So all the women's abharan are there put on the gods. As if without this, fortunately I think they have not yet come to a Punjabi. The goddesses are not, they are still in saris. Thanks goodness. But we want to see the Godheads exactly in our womanhood. So this is our level of consciousness. But if we evolve, then you see God becomes more and more a presence and a quality. We almost go beyond the form. That is where Sri Aurobindo, if I can guess rightly, tells us the best and the highest form of a spiritual practice is to feel their presence. Not necessarily to put 120 photos around me. Even then I may not feel the presence. So when you grow in your consciousness, you feel the presence. That means you are going beyond the form. It is not the Nirguna aspect. Don't think when I say beyond form is a formlessness. It is the presence of the person. It is the presence of the mother, the Sri Aurobindo, the Sachidananda, Krishna, Indra, whatever. So we have to go beyond the form and feel the presence of the consciousness. So there you have no such problems of decoration or this or that. So that is itself an indicator of the level of the consciousness. So what happens then, wherever I am in the market house or in the supermarket or in the jungle, if I have the presence, it means what? Actually, if you go deeper, when will you feel the presence? when you're closer to a psychic being. You cannot feel the presence mentally. You say, oh no, I feel the mother's presence around. But somebody says, hey, which side, right side or left side? You're done for. It's not that kind of a rational thing. And that would be, I would say, a lie to say mentally I feel the presence. You cannot feel the presence mentally. It's got to be on the level of the psychic being. It could be very faint even to begin with, I would say. That does happen. When you are always in a deep inner mood. Not necessarily if you go to the seashore and walking, you may not feel. But the moment you touch the inner layer, please don't take it as a personal praise, but it's so concrete I cannot but explain that recently I was in Delhi and I was coming via the airport, and suddenly in the airport, in all the midst of that hubbub of the Delhi airport, suddenly I felt it around me. So it's not that I was invoking or anything, but maybe I touched a deeper layer. And then it was so concrete a presence, my whole being was, non-existent, relaxed, no mental worries, no thoughts, no anxieties. And to the extent to say, well, I'm here. Do what thou wilt. Take me, keep me. It was such a beautiful presence to say that moment of a surrender, where your individuality doesn't mean much. You exist or don't exist, or you are or you aren't. It has no validity. So what I want to say is, that is the presence. Not mentally harboring, no, I have to do this, I have to go there, sit there, meditation 10 hours. You will do all the exercises. But as Sri Aurobindo says, one who chooses the divine has been chosen by the divine. So when she chooses to come to you, she can come to you in the airport or the Chennai Central Railway Station. It doesn't matter. She touches. And then the world vanishes. And at that time the airport didn't exist for me. I was an empty vehicle walking in the airport. It was so close to what one calls an illusion. I'm telling you because this is the best thing I can tell you. I'm not mentalizing. So that way I suppose I can convey this meaning of the presence. So this is what he says, that we have to evolve. And then he would say, we should be inclined to wonder how these fancies of children found their way into such profound philosophical religions as Buddhism and Hinduism, if it were not so patent that men will not deny themselves the luxury of tacking on the rubbish from their past to the deeper thoughts of their sages. Now he is coming to this major question. If it is such a childish phenomenon, this question of God as a punishment, God as a reward, why did it come into great religions like Buddhism and Hinduism? Because they are very profound philosophies. Why and how did they find their way into these religions? And here is the answer. No doubt, since these ideas were so prominent, they must have had their use in training humanity. You see the brilliant answer. So Sri Aurobindo always has this wonderful way of seeing and giving every philosophy its perfect place in the scale of time, evolutionary time. So he said these were training humanity. Perhaps even it is true that the Supreme deals with the child soul according to its childishness and allows it to continue its sensational imaginations of heaven and hell for a time beyond the depth of the physical body. You see, if a child wants something and he says, no mama, I want to go and play now, I don't want to read and do my homework. Mommy knows it's bad, she should be doing the homework. But she says, alright, son, if you are really in a mood to play, I cannot stop you. Go and play. So he says, Sri Aurobindo is saying, even the Supreme deals with childhood humanity in that level, on that level. He says, all right, if you think of heaven and hell and all that, let's create a heaven and hell for your sake. It's just, as it says, childhood imaginations or childhood fancies, sensational imaginations. If you really want that, let's go through the game of heaven and hell. It may be very torturesome, but it is a level of the human growth. So in the beginning he deals with the child soul in that manner, and perhaps both these ideas of afterlife and of rebirth as fields of punishment and reward were needed because suited to our half-mentalized animality. You see, the problem is not God's. We are at a half-mentalized animality. You see, if you are at a half-mental animality, our pleasures are gross. Our pains are physical suffering. Our happiness depends on gross things, physical things, material things. So he says, all right, I will give you in heaven all the luxury of all the wines and all the geishas in the world. Because we have equated heaven always with physical pleasures. Nobody has ever said heaven is where you can meditate 18 hours out of the 24 hours. I don't think I have come across any such description. It's all the time a physical pleasure. So he would say, but after a certain stage, the system ceases to be really effective. Men believe in heaven and hell, but go on sinning merrily. Quit at last by a papal indulgence or the final priestly absolution or a deathbed repentance or a bath in the Ganges or a sanctified death at Benares. Such are the childish devices by which we escape from our childishness. Very frank and beautiful. That we have all this question of sinning. We have all the heaven and hell, I've been to many of these wonderful museums in the Western world, and I've seen at least 30% of these museums are full of the paintings of heaven and hell. And yet, such graphic paintings are there of your hell, but has sinning lessened? Has it become less in the world? Every other day, moral people will tell us, you see on your TV, all the Guru Bhais telling us what is the meaning of heaven, kya karoge to kya hoga, kya nahi ho to kya bharega. All the thing, and yet, you leave that Guru Bhai after 1 hour, by 9:30 you are back home, you put on your TV on, blah, there you are, back to your comfort. So Sri Aurobindo is saying, is our sin less because of the paintings on the wall or paintings on the screen, descriptions on the book or on the TV? We keep sinning, but in the end we say, Beta, mujhe Banaras le jana marne ka aage. You want to go to Banaras because there if you die, all your sins are washed away. Or if you take a dip, I think no Bengali is a sinner in Calcutta because they have Ganges right beside them. They can go and take a dip in the Ganges and all sins are washed. So this is the childish behavior we think. Go and take a dip in the Ganges or go to Banaras. Or even we have in Christianity this question of the deathbed repentance. When the person is about to die, you call the Pope or the Father and he says, please repent, and he reads something from the Bible and tatastu, you go to seventh heaven. So he says all this is childishness. And in the end, the mind grows adult and puts the whole nursery nonsense away with contempt. The reward and punishment theory of rebirth, if a little more elevated or at least less crudely sensational, comes to be as ineffective. And it is good that it should be so, for it is intolerable that man with his divine capacity should continue to be virtuous for a reward and shun sin out of terror. Better a strong sinner than a selfish coward or a petty huckster with God. There is more divinity in him, more capacity of elevation, Truly the Gita has said well, Kripana Palahetavaha. And it is inconceivable that the system of this vast and majestic world should have been founded on these petty and paltry motives. There is reason in this, there is. Then reason of the nursery puerile. Ethics, then ethics of the mud and muddy. Well, we'll take up the last portion once again because there's so much into it. He says, this question of, that the divine, that the soul of man should be virtuous because of a reward and shun sin because of terror, he says, it is too primitive a reason for the soul's growth. The soul doesn't come here just to get a reward or to shun sin because of the horrors of hell. He says all this is too childish. There is a greater meaning. There is a greater capacity in man, and we'll take it up next time. So you can see what Sri Aurobindo demolishes basically in this chapter is this puerile, primitive idea of the ethical God. So this entire question of sin and virtue and reward and punishment is absolutely nonsensical, unacceptable, childish and primitive. So if you are talking about rebirth, it has a greater reason and not this little primitive reasons given by religion in all these days. So you can now see the trend to be a bit away from religion also shows somewhere that some young minds want to go away from a God who is just but a moral God. They want to see another aspect of God. In India we have this Shakti aspect. In Sri Aurobindo we have the Maheshwari aspect. Mahalakshmi, Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahasaraswati. So we don't want to see only that punitive aspect, we want to see the grandeur of the divine in different aspects. So you see, the very fact that Sri Aurobindo has given us these four major aspects of the divine, he has suddenly enlarged the whole concept. In none of the four aspects is there the question of reward and punishment. In none. So it itself shows how much is elevating us to a concept of God which has gone way beyond these primitive religions who think of only religion and reward and punishment. We'll come to that in our next class.